Now here again is Deborah Block. Deborah, that was a powerful, powerful expression of the metaphor conveyed by Edward Hicks' painting, The Peaceable Kingdom. I have a feeling it's just a part of who you are.
That painting has been in my imagination and in my heart for over 30 years. And I think, like Hicks, as we see peace less, we need to envision it more. I just saw Pablo Picasso's painting, Dove of Peace, Face of Peace, Dance of Peace. I think those would be good images to have in schools as well as churches and synagogues.
Well, and what a wonderful teaching device for all people of faith. The church, the arts, using art forms as a way to convey an authentic sense of faith. And how is that being lived out in Emmanuel Presbyterian Church on the east side of Milwaukee?
Well, one of the reasons that that painting has become special to me, and I think to many of us at Emmanuel, is because one of those versions was done the year that our congregation was founded in 1837. And in that year, when our congregation organized, first congregation in the city of Milwaukee, in fact, Presbyterianism in this country was coming apart. And much like the split that happened among the Quakers, this old school, old light, new light division happened. And so that picture represents part of our story, part of our unfortunate story, as well as holding before us the promise of peace and a vision of all these creatures living together.
I wanted to pick up on that a little bit. You've chosen to bring it into the church as an example like we've talked about. What have you encountered in your time at Emmanuel in terms of challenges around peace and justice issues in the city of Milwaukee, for instance?
Well, Milwaukee, like many cities, is not a peaceable kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
We have significant troubles in our schools and on our city streets with violence, particularly handgun violence.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in our church, more immediately, our Presbyterian congregations have been challenged, as many Protestant congregations have been, to be inclusive of all God's children, regardless of age, gender, or sexual orientation in the life of our communities.
But you've done that. You've been recognized for that. So in what ways have you specifically implemented some of these ideas that you talk about here? How have you reached out to the community in a more inclusive way?
I think you take seriously the biblical promise, the vision of predators and prey, powerful and powerless, and put everybody together in the place that God has given us to live together.
Well, talk about the Jewish Presbyterian dialogue that you're so active in there.
We have had some difficulties in the Presbyterian Church in our long time good relationships with the Jewish community over some issues of divestment in the Middle East. And coming out of that has been the very hopeful, helpful, productive dialogue, new dialogue between the Jewish community and Presbyterians. This is happening on local levels here in Chicago as well as up in Milwaukee, and it's happening at a national level with a Jewish Presbyterian consultation, Jewish leaders from all over the country.
So is there a chance for a peaceable kingdom coming out of that dialogue?
There is a peaceable kingdom, and I think we've gone through a period where like, if our friend Edward Hicks was painting it, we all moved apart a little bit, and our postures got a little tense, and perhaps our expressions even got a little wary and weary. But I would say we're coming back together again in the promise and the reality of peace.
You know, this was really a life-changing journey for you, although short, to experience the images of faith and action through the Quaker Church. Who are some of the other heroes, heroines, people of faith who have inspired you along your own personal journey in the context of justice issues?
Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. One of the most powerful partnerships, I think, in the American story, certainly in women's story, who had a real passionate conviction about justice and who drew their convictions from their faith traditions, one a Quaker and one a staunch Scotch Presbyterian.
I wanted to ask you too, how can we long for peace a little bit more as faith communities? We talk about being active in social justice, but with this example of a peaceable kingdom, it is kind of a longing through our faith to have that come about, isn't it?
It is, and I think immediately in your comment of the Amish community that we have recently become acquainted or reacquainted with, and the importance of teaching peace to children. The question, how can you do this? How can you be so forgiving after such a tragedy? Made us realize that it wasn't a one-time response, but a lifetime discipline of living in peaceful, reconciling relationships that often has forgiveness at the heart.
You're talking about the murder victims'
Yes.
families for reconciliation.
Yes.
Of course, forgiveness is a basic tenet of the Christian faith. You are recognized by McCormick Seminary. You are a trustee of McCormick Seminary in Chicago, and you were recently recognized with a distinguished ministry award by McCormick Seminary. And you've also been known as one who has grace under pressure. How are you able, how do you manage that when you are in the middle of so much divisiveness in the church, in the pew, in the community?
Keep an image of peace always in your mind and your heart. It's always there to get to. The high road is the only place to travel. And I really believe that in our hearts, that's what everybody feels called to and called to make happen. And if you keep the doors open and the argument de-escalated, you can sometimes get there.
I bet you look to inspiration from some of the women in ministry in the past too. I know you're very interested in that. We've got about 30 seconds left, but you mentioned some of your inspirations before. Do you call on that historical example of moving forward in that way?
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to know, for instance, the first woman who was ordained in the Presbyterian Church, Margaret Towner, and in her own way, for 50 years, she has been a peacemaker and a change maker in our faith community.
Thank you so much for joining us, Deborah.
Thank you.